Great, thank you. So yes, my name is Patrick. I'm a first-year PhD student in the Energy and Environment group at the Department of Computer Science. I was a research assistant last year, and the years before that, I was an undergraduate here, so I've been here for quite a while. And today I want to talk about maybe how computer science is hindering climate science, and certainly what we've seen in our kind of multidisciplinary work with plant scientists and ecologists. So the first thing to make you aware about is what projects we've been working on. One of the main ones is looking at additional carbon in avoided deforestation projects in the tropical moist forest regions. So the images on the screen are showing a project, which is the green points, and counterfactual pixel matchings, which are the blue ones. And what we're trying to do here is say, we've got an avoided deforestation project, and we want to see through time, is it actually having an impact or not? We look at counterfactual pixels, which is areas within the same kind of country that have the same ecoregion, same elevation as pixels within the project. And then we look over time to see if actually maybe the trees are staying there and the trees are disappearing elsewhere. And through this, we get an idea of just how much carbon a particular project is managing to keep there. There are lots of other factors that we want to include in here. For example, local livelihoods, the kind of economics of the region, social justice. We won't dive into that, but this is more kind of just a quantitative part of the project. But whilst we were doing this work, my colleagues and I noticed quite a few points of uncertainty that were arising from computer science. And so this is a really nice talk to come after Amelia's, where we were talking about maybe more methodological uncertainty from 40% to 210%. But also we have problems in that the data itself is just unknown sometimes, which data anybody's using at any given point. So this data set that we're looking at is from the European Commission. It's a map that's showing similar ideas to what Amelia showed, which is degraded forest, deforested forest, undisturbed forest, water, and other, and some regrowth. The point to take away from this image is that this data is for the same year, which is 2008, in Indonesia, but it's been downloaded at two separate points in time from the same URL. One was by a colleague and put onto a shared machine, and then one was by myself inside a pipeline that we were trying to run this computation on. And for 2 weeks, my colleague and I were trying to get the same numbers and going back and forth saying, are you using the version of this? Are you using the version of that? What computer are you running on? What architecture are you running on? And ultimately, it boiled down to we were just not even using the same inputs in the first place. And this is a lot more common than you might think. But if you look at this image, I think what's quite startling is just how much the change is in this particular region because of algorithms that are being changed by the scientists who work on this project, which is all completely good and fair. We should update to the best kind of technologies, but we just had no idea it was happening, and we had no idea of checking either. So the image on the right has a lot more deforested forest, which is the orange, compared to the one on the left. And you can imagine if we're trying to work out the additional carbon in a project, if suddenly we go from there's a bunch of undisturbed forest to there's a bunch of deforested forest, it's going to drop significantly. And so you might think, okay, well, the data, we can get a grapple on that and make sure we're using the right data dependencies. But of course, a lot of this analysis is now programming and code. And a lot of the time, we're also working with what has been coined vernacular programmers. These are people who are domain experts within their field. They might be ecologists and plant scientists, but who have to do programming on a daily basis. So maybe don't have the computer science fundamentals that computer scientists who have done undergraduate degrees or things similar might have. So we found another discrepancy, which was there's a library called GDAL, which is used by maybe every geospatial programmer out there. And we had two different versions installed on two different machines. And we were running the same command line arguments to try and work out a terrain ruggedness index. Again, the science doesn't matter too much. The idea here is that we just have the same command that's being put in, and I've been kind enough to label the outputs differently here, the two different TIFF files at the end. But we were getting completely different results. And again, we didn't really know this until we started looking at the actual versions of everything we were using. And of course, these things have dependencies, and those dependencies have dependencies, and all these versions start mattering a whole lot. And this is all layered on top of the fact that the data is maybe uncertain, all on top of the fact that the methodologies themselves have uncertainty just by the scientific method, maybe using sampling or something like that. And so we're building up all of this uncertainty that's compounding and then getting results at the end that we then go on to inform policy, decide whether certain forests get cut down for different reasons, impacts local livelihoods, as we were talking about, And at the end of it, we're not even certain ourselves where the results have come from. And then there's one final thing that's happening with computer science, I think, is that suddenly we're allowed to make incredibly complicated methodologies very quickly, and without too much care of adding more complexity on top of it. So we were kind of bounded before a lot with the scientific methodology and just what was possible with a group of researchers and maybe some physical devices going out into the field, funding kind of costs and things like that. Whereas now, with things like cloud computing and access to data, it's very, very easy for anyone to create very complicated methodologies very quickly. And then as that complexity grows with all this uncertainty, we suddenly have an explosion of uncertainty and we have no idea where anything came from anymore. And this can be really problematic, as I said, when it comes to things like policymaking. And so one question is like, okay, I've given you a lot of problems, like what are we doing about it? And that is we're building hopefully tools to help ecologists and these vernacular programmers within the geospatial context to get a handle on the uncertainty in their data, the uncertainty in their code, the uncertainty in dependencies, on the operating systems they're using, and also on the methodologies that they're creating, which is an awful lot of work. This is an example of some code that we run in order to track dependency within a methodology itself. So if you can see some of the nodes in this graph, we have a dependency on the JRC dataset that then spawns into all these things that calculate rasters for countries, the slopes, the elevation, and things like that. And we can track this the whole way through and tag outputs saying, here's where all of your inputs came from. What's more, we use things like open source technologies like Docker and ZFS, all these wonderful things that we have in computer science. And we try and leverage that to help ecologists with their programming. Kind of vitally, we don't want to change too much the workflows that they're doing because they're already quite confident using things like Python and R. And we wouldn't want to come in and say, oh, have you heard about this shiny new language? You should use it because it has all of these great features, but now you have to go back to the start and rewrite everything. So I think there's a bit of a to and fro there to make sure that that works. And so there's a lot of things to do next. I think it would be really interesting to look more closely at how these uncertainties are impacting ecology research. We know within our own group that it has quite significant impacts, but how far does this go in terms of already published results? Be interesting to ask some more ecologists just which data sets they've been using and if they can reproduce the results today for us. As I've already said, it would be one of the main goals is to really seamlessly integrate a lot of this technology into their work without having to tell them you need to change everything you're already doing, relearn programming languages, etc. One thing I'm really interested in is improving the communication mediums between ecologists and computer science. So one thing I haven't touched on too much here is the back and forth we had with ecologists working out what is your methodology and how can we as computer scientists implement that in an efficient way, an optimized way, and make sure we're all kind of talking the same language. That's been really difficult and proved to be a real sticking point in our research. And then the final one is to really make sure that we're building tools that anyone wants to use. So user studies can be difficult. There's a human factor, there's an ethics factor, but I think it's really vital to make sure we're not just building more technology that nobody wants to use. And yeah, so lastly, thank you all for listening. There's a bunch of people I'd like to thank, which is Anil and Keshav, both supervisors for my PhD, colleagues within the plant science and ecology department that I've been working with for 2 years, in particular Tom Swinfield, my office mates who have helped with some of these slides, Maddie and Ryan. And if you would like to get into contact, there's my website and email, and I'd be happy to take any questions if anyone has them. Thank you.